I would betray you, that's perfectly clear. But the plan, never.
You know, there's a lot of television out there, which you've probably become extremely aware of recently, since odds are you're probably spending a lot more time at home just vegging out in front of a screen. And as such, you are probably checking out some shows that you might not have watched before. So maybe you came upon a Spanish crime drama called Money Heist, and maybe, just maybe, you fell completely in love with it. So, of course, you're probably sitting there right now craving more of the frantic action, deep character drama, and classic heist-style twists and turns. While I can't necessarily give you all of that, what I can give you are a handful of little details and facts about the show that you might not have picked up on while watching it. Now, due to the nature of the things that I'm going to be discussing in this video, I'm just going to go ahead and slap a spoiler warning up there for the most recent season of the show. If you haven't made it all the way through part 4, you might not want to watch this video, especially considering what the first entry is. It's gonna be a doozy. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right into it.
I don't know where the professor is.
Wrong answer.
Season 4, or Part 4 if you prefer, ended on a bit of a sour note, with Inspector Sierra coming face to face with the professor at his hideout. Things aren't exactly looking good for the future, but if you didn't immediately jump away during the final credits, you might have caught a little detail that might just hint at how the interaction between Sierra and the professor might go down. A few seconds into the credits, a woman's voice begins singing Bella Ciao, the sort of anthem of the crew. More on that later, by the way. So far in the series, the only people who have sang that song have been the followers of the professor. So whose voice is it that is singing it now? Well, that's none other than Sierra herself. So what could this mean? Well, it could be hinting that Sierra may be throwing on a red jumpsuit next season. While she has so far been a staunch opponent of the robbers, Money Heist isn't exactly shy about big reveals. Maybe, just maybe, she has been playing the long game, somehow helping the crew out from the other side all along. Guess we'll just have to wait for season 5 to find out for sure. Now, most of you who are watching this video probably discovered Money Heist via Netflix, the main distributor of the show around the globe. But did you know that that's not where the show originated? Yep. It was not conceived as a Netflix original. The show originally aired on the Spanish network Antena 3, and in its first few episodes, it did incredibly well ratings-wise. However, as seasons 1 and 2 went on, viewership quickly tanked. So much so that the series cast and crew pretty much made peace with the idea that the show was a dud. And that's when Netflix came in, offering the show a new life on their streaming platform. And while Netflix did little to really push the series to their subscribers, the gamble has seemed to pay off. While Netflix refrains from releasing official numbers on viewership, it is reportedly now one of the most viewed shows on the platform in Italy, Argentina, Chile, France, Portugal, and Brazil. You know, despite being a fantastic show, you've got to admit, Money Heist isn't exactly going to win any awards for having a super original title. But the show's original title was a bit better. In Spain, where the show was originally produced, the title it was given was La Casa de Papel, which translated into English means the House of Paper. In this case, of course, referring to the fact that the show largely takes place in banks and such, where paper money is often stored. That is a much more interesting title, and is better than the alternative title that they almost went with, La Casa de Carta, or the House of Cards, which was avoided in order to not be confused with the Netflix series by the same name. Tokyo is probably the big standout in terms of characters on the show. She manages to be equal parts endearing and utterly awesome. If you are a movie fan though, she might just remind you of a certain little girl from a certain 90s action flick. Yeah, Tokyo was based off of Natalie Portman's character Matilda from the 1994 film Leon the Professional. Pretty much everything about her initial appearance was borrowed from that character. Her clothes, her hair, even some of her mannerisms. Not that it is at all a bad thing though. Leon the Professional is an iconic bit of cinema, so it is understandable why the creators may have wanted to pay homage to it. In addition to being a just all-around awesome character, Tokyo was also the first character in the series to get a name. Reportedly, her name came around due to almost complete happenstance. Jesus Colmenar, one of the show's directors and producers, stated that it all came about because Alex Pina, creator of the show, once came into work wearing a shirt with Tokyo printed on it. Colmenar saw it and said, "Hey, that would make a great character name," and from there, the name stuck. Now, besides Tokyo, almost all of the rest of the crew utilize names that are based upon national capitals. Berlin is the capital of Germany, Helsinki is Finland, Lisbon is Portugal, etc. There are only a handful of characters on the team who don't go by national capitals. Denver is the capital of Colorado, a state. Rio de Janeiro is the capital of the Brazilian state by the same name. Palermo is the capital of Sicily, which is a region in Italy. And Marseille is just a particularly populated French city. Not quite sure why these particular characters weren't given the names of national capitals, but maybe something about them in particular will be revealed someday. One member of the crew who doesn't have a city-based name at all is the Professor, the team's mastermind. However, while he doesn't have one officially, the actor behind the character, Alvaro Morte, thinks he knows which city name would fit him best. During an interview, when he was asked about what city he would choose to be named after, he said, quote, "The concept of what it is fits in, but we have to remove the religious components. This would be Vatican City. It's a state city, a very small one. But like the Professor, it's always shielded, and at the same time, it has a great power all over the world." Vatican City is of course the place where the Pope lives, a small independent city-state in the heart of Rome, which itself is the capital of Italy. Being the seat of power of an entire religion, the parallels to the Professor are fairly obvious, and do indeed work super well. Maybe someday, this name will become canon in the series itself. Something that the earlier seasons aren't exactly great at conveying, that the later seasons do a better job at illustrating, is the relationship between the Professor and Berlin. In case you didn't quite catch it through all the dialogue, the two aren't just good friends and partners in crime. In fact, the two are actually half-brothers on his mother's side. Seems like the Professor liked to keep the leadership side of things in his close inner circle. And what is closer than family? Now here's a question involving Berlin that could have some pretty major implications. Who exactly is Tatiana, Berlin's mysterious ex-wife? Well, there is one theory that could provide an answer. The theory posits that Tatiana, despite being played by a completely different actress, is actually Inspector Sierra. With Sierra singing Bella Ciao in the end credits for season 4, this would give her a solid connection to the crew. And the kicker to this theory? Sierra states that her husband's name is German, which looks and sounds an awful lot like German, or Germany, which Berlin is the capital of. Throughout Money Heist, besides the main theme, there is one song that keeps popping up all over the place. This is of course the little tune entitled Bella Ciao, and it's actually an old Italian folk song. But what does it actually mean? Well, Bella Ciao, or Goodbye Beautiful in English, is a song that has long been used as a sort of anti-fascist anthem, with its lyrics having been changed during World War II in order to reflect the Italian citizens rising up against Mussolini and his followers. It has also since been adopted worldwide as a sort of rallying cry for freedom, which is probably why the resistance in the show is so fond of it. Here's a fun behind-the-scenes fact regarding how the show is made. Unlike a lot of modern dramas, Money Heist isn't completely plotted out before the cameras start rolling. In fact, the episodes are filmed in chronological order, since the scripts for the episodes are written only a short while before production on those episodes actually begins. Yep, the show is written in parallel to filming. This is done so that the show's writers can better pivot based upon what they think is best for the show overall. For example, in season 3, a one-and-done joke about Marseille's love of animals quickly became a defining character trait, humanizing this often stoic criminal. And given the way that the show is written, it is completely understandable that some elements of the show's original plan didn't wind up making it to the final product. One such example is the actual reasoning behind everyone joining in on the heist in the first place. Now, we all know that Berlin had a serious disease, specifically Helmer's myopathy. However, originally, many, if not all, of the members of the crew were meant to have terminal illnesses themselves. The original idea was that each of them would be seeking out the means to pay for their own treatment or seek to get back at the system for failing them. Ultimately, this idea was axed, with only really Berlin keeping the disease aspect of his character. Something else that was included in the original idea for the show, that actually did manage to make it to the screen this time around, is Denver's signature out there laugh.
I'll show you my tiny bikini.
Even before Denver's actor Jamie Lorente was cast in the role, the character was meant to have a distinctive laugh. Early drafts of the script called for the character to have a quote-unquote trashy laugh, and each actor who was brought in to read for the role was asked to interpret that in their own way. And now we have his memorable chuckle up there on the screen for all to see. Here is an interesting real-world connection to the show. The iconic red jumpsuits and Salvador Dali masks that the robbers wear on the show have actually been used in real-world protests and even a couple of copycat bank robberies. Protests-wise, the outfits have popped up in demonstrations in Lebanon, Iraq, France, and Chile, which, if you remember from earlier, are some of the countries where the show is reportedly a bigger hit. Couple that with the overall political nature of the show, and it makes sense that the politically minded would latch on to the show's iconography. There are two scenes throughout the series that proved to be particularly difficult to film. First was the sequence when the professor tried to rain millions of euros down over Madrid. This sequence was complicated largely by rapidly shifting weather patterns, which made getting the money to go to where it needed to go nearly impossible. Next was the sequence where Denver had to scuba dive inside the vault. Now, shooting underwater is always difficult, but when you take into account the fact that the team had to build a replica of the vault in an underwater tank, and that the gold bar props that they had were made of foam that kept trying to float away, it makes the whole thing significantly more difficult. Does look totally awesome though. Special effects are always fun to hear about, as they're probably the most entertaining part of the whole filmmaking process. One great example of special effects work that we see during the series happened during the first battle between the crew and police forces. During this conflict, several police cars had their windows replaced by something called sugar glass. Sugar glass, in case you're unaware, acts like regular glass in most cases, but is made out of sugar, as the name would suggest. It breaks and shatters just like real glass, but is nearly harmless, meaning that there weren't exactly any risks involving cuts and so forth, making it a lot safer than actual glass. There is one character among the crew who might just have the most on-the-nose name if you really stop and think about it. Stockholm started out as a simple secretary, working in the Royal Mint of Spain. However, once the Great Heist went down, she quickly fell in love with Denver and wound up joining the robbers. Now that has us asking one simple question. Does Stockholm have Stockholm Syndrome? Stockholm Syndrome refers to the idea of when a captive falls in love with his or her captor. Now that certainly sounds like Stockholm, alright? The show never outwardly addresses it, but for my money, she might just have her namesake syndrome. One of the more action-packed scenes in Season 4 of Money Heist showed the escaped bodyguard fending off the crew members who were coming at him from both sides. In order to make his escape from that situation, he whipped out 2 pistols and fired them each in a different direction, which is something that we see quite often in movies and TV shows. But how realistic is it to go guns akimbo like that? Is it as effective as the media makes it seem? Nope. In fact, many different experts have tested it out and found that it is nigh on impossible to accurately use dual handguns, meaning the chances of actually hitting any targets are slim to none. So the next time that you're in a gunfight for whatever reason, I'd avoid trying to utilize your best John Woo moves. You know, Rio is a pretty young character. Super young, actually. At the start of the series, he is said to be only about 19 years old. Which is kind of interesting all things considered, especially when you take into consideration that they also state that he's been hacking for years. So wait a minute, that would mean that he was an experienced criminal while he was still in high school, or at least the Spanish equivalent of high school. That's one of those things that you don't really think of too much, but it definitely puts the whole genius part of his qualifications into perspective. The guns that we see the robbers use throughout the series are definitely some of the more interesting ones visually, but what are they exactly? Well, those are variations of the Heckler & Koch G36, a rifle designed in the early 90s for use by the Unified Armed Forces of Germany. though it has since been adopted by militaries the world over. For its part, Hollywood tends to use it due to its interesting appearance, looking more futuristic and space-agey than something like the M4 platform that the US military commonly uses.
Don't put ideas in my head, huh? Don't